My brother thought he could blackmail me over my secret, but I spent 8 years gathering evidence that revealed his illegal financial and watched him fall. I spent 8 years planning for this moment. The moment my brother thought he was destroying my life, not knowing he was walking straight into the trap I'd been setting since I was 18. I never thought I'd be the kind of person who spent 8 years meticulously planning someone's downfall. But then again, I never thought my own brother would try to use my deepest secrets as weapons against me either. My name is Orson Blake, 26 years old, and if you saw me walking down the street, you'd probably think I was just another software engineer heading to work. Average height, unremarkable clothes, the kind of guy who blends into crowds without trying. I work at a tech startup downtown, debugging code and building applications that most people will never think about. I live alone in a one-bedroom apartment on the quieter side of town, the kind of place where neighbors nod politely but don't ask personal questions. To the outside world, I'm perfectly ordinary, boring even. But there's a part of my life that my family has never seen, a truth I've been protecting for nearly a decade. And my older brother Derek? He's convinced he just stumbled upon the ultimate leverage over me. What he doesn't realize is that I've been waiting for this moment since I was 18 years old. The Blake family operated like a well-oiled machine, and machines require precise parts performing specific functions. My parents, Margaret and William Blake, didn't just run a household, they orchestrated it. Every birthday dinner had assigned seating, every family vacation followed detailed itineraries, every conversation at the dinner table had an underlying purpose, whether it was discussing career achievements, relationship milestones, or future plans that aligned with their vision of respectability. In this perfectly choreographed family dynamic, Derek was the shining star. 3 years my senior and blessed with a kind of natural charisma that made teachers remember his name years later, he effortlessly claimed the role of golden child. His report cards weren't just good, they were framed and displayed in the hallway. His football trophies lined the mantelpiece like monuments to parental pride. When he brought girlfriends home, our mother would immediately start imagining wedding venues, and our father would begin subtle interrogations about their family's social standing. Derek had this way of commanding attention without even trying. He'd walk into a room, and conversations would naturally orient toward him. Adults loved his confident handshake and direct eye contact. Teachers praised his leadership qualities. Even random strangers seemed drawn to his easy smile, and the way he could make anyone feel like the most interesting person in the world, at least for the duration of their conversation. I was never meant to be the star of that particular show. Where Derek was bold, I was contemplative. Where he thrived in social situations, I found my energy in solitude. While he spent Friday nights at parties that would become legendary high school memories, I was in my room teaching myself Python and dreaming about writing code that might change the world in small but meaningful ways. Our parents didn't disapprove of my interests exactly, but it was obvious which son fit their template for success. The difference between us became even more pronounced as we got older. Derek talked constantly about his plans to work in finance, about the Manhattan apartment he'd eventually own, about the kind of wealth he'd accumulate by age 30. His ambitions were concrete and impressive, the kind that made our parents exchange proud glances across the dinner table. My dreams of working in technology and building useful software seemed almost quaint by comparison, more like hobbies than serious career aspirations. But what really defined our relationship wasn't the obvious differences in personality or ambition. It was the subtle, almost invisible way Derek maintained control over our family's narrative. To anyone watching from the outside, we were just typical brothers with the usual mix of competition and camaraderie. We'd play basketball in the driveway, argue over TV channels, and occasionally team up against our parents on issues like extended curfews or family vacation destinations. Behind that facade, though, Derek had developed an almost artistic ability to undermine me in ways that were nearly impossible to prove or explain. He'd bump into my desk just as I was saving an important project, causing hours of work to disappear. When friends called, he'd answer the phone and deliver messages that somehow never quite reached me. During family discussions about my future, he had a talent for asking seemingly innocent questions that highlighted my uncertainties and made my plans sound unrealistic or immature. The most maddening part was how skillfully he managed to stay invisible in all of this. Our parents never saw him interfere with my work or intercept my calls. They only saw the end results. their younger son who seemed disorganized, antisocial, and maybe not quite as focused as his older brother. Derek had mastered the art of sabotage by proxy, creating problems that appeared to be my own failures while positioning himself as the helpful brother who was just trying to keep me grounded and realistic. This dynamic continued for years, becoming such a normal part of our family life that I almost stopped noticing it. I adapted by becoming more secretive about my projects, more careful about my conversations, more guarded about sharing anything that could be used against me later. I learned to keep my real thoughts and feelings close to my chest, sharing only the safe, sanitized versions that wouldn't give Derek ammunition for his subtle campaigns of undermining. Everything changed during the summer I turned 16. Like most teenagers, I was going through that awkward phase of trying to figure out who I really was, beneath all the expectations and assumptions that had been built up around me. I started questioning things I'd never thought to question before. I began exploring parts of my identity that didn't fit neatly into the boxes my family had constructed for me. It started with small things: new music that spoke to something I couldn't quite name, books that offered perspectives I'd never considered, online communities where people discussed ideas and experiences that felt familiar yet forbidden. I found myself drawn to conversations and content that my family would never understand, that challenged their fundamental assumptions about how the world worked and what constituted a normal, acceptable life. For months, I managed to keep this exploration private. I was careful about my browser history, discreet about the forums I visited, cautious about the people I talked to online. I thought I had created a safe space where I could explore these new aspects of myself without judgment or interference from the family dynamics that had always felt so constraining. I should have known that Derek was watching. It happened on a Tuesday evening in late August. I was in my room, absorbed in something on my computer that was helping me understand a part of myself that I'd been struggling to articulate. I wasn't doing anything inappropriate or dangerous. Just reading, learning, trying to make sense of feelings and attractions that didn't align with what my family considered normal or acceptable. I didn't hear Derek come into my room. I was too focused on the screen, too caught up in finally finding words for experiences I'd been having but couldn't explain. By the time I sensed his presence behind me, it was too late. He'd seen enough to understand exactly what I was looking at, and more importantly, what it meant about who I really was. The silence stretched between us for what felt like hours but was probably only seconds. I could feel his eyes on the screen, could sense him processing what he was seeing and calculating its potential value. When I finally turned around to face him, the expression on his face told me everything I needed to know. It wasn't shock or concern or even disappointment. It was satisfaction. Pure, undisguised satisfaction at having discovered something he could use. Well, he said, his voice carrying that particular tone he used when he thought he'd gained an advantage. This is certainly interesting, little brother. I closed the laptop quickly, but we both knew it was too late. The damage was done. I wonder, he continued, settling himself comfortably on my desk chair like he planned to stay for a while, what Mom and Dad would think if they knew about your extracurricular interests. That night, I lay awake for hours staring at the ceiling and thinking about what had just happened. I knew Derek well enough to understand that this wasn't going to be a one-time conversation. He wouldn't confront me directly or make immediate threats. Instead, he'd file this information away and use it strategically, bringing it up whenever he needed to remind me of my place in the family hierarchy. He probably expected me to come to him within a few days, panicked and desperate, begging him not to tell our parents and promising to do whatever he wanted in exchange for his silence. He likely imagined years of having complete control over me, of being able to manipulate my behavior and choices by threatening to expose what he saw as my shameful secret. But as I lay there in the darkness, I realized something that Derek hadn't counted on. I wasn't going to let him control me anymore. I was done being the victim of his subtle manipulations and psychological games. Instead, I was going to turn the tables on him completely. Instead, I started planning. It began small. I started paying closer attention to Derek's activities, his habits, his secrets. I noticed things our parents never saw: how he would disappear for hours with vague explanations, how he always seemed to have more money than his part-time job should provide, how he would get mysterious phone calls that made his face go pale. When I turned 18 and left for college, I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. Instead of going to the prestigious university 3 states away that had accepted me, I chose the local community college and continued living at home. I told everyone it was for financial reasons, that I wanted to save money by staying close to family. The truth was, I needed to be close enough to keep watching. College was where I really learned to become invisible. I studied computer science, but I also taught myself other skills: digital forensics, network security, data recovery. I got internships at companies that specialized in financial investigation and cybersecurity. I learned how to find information that people thought they had hidden forever, and slowly, carefully, I started building a file on my brother. Derek had gone into financial services right after college, working as a broker for a mid-sized investment firm downtown. To our parents, he was the picture of success. Expensive suits, a nice car, stories about big deals and important clients. He moved into a fancy apartment and started dating a lawyer named Victoria, who our parents absolutely adored. But I was learning that Derek's success wasn't quite what it appeared to be. It started with small inconsistencies. Credit card statements I accidentally saw when helping him move showed purchases that didn't match his lifestyle. Bank records I glimpsed during family gatherings revealed deposits and withdrawals that followed suspicious patterns. Phone conversations I overheard late at night had a desperate edge that didn't match his confident public persona. By the time I was 22, I had confirmed what I suspected. Derek was living far beyond his means, supplementing his income through increasingly risky and questionable methods, and had developed a serious gambling problem that he was hiding from everyone, including Victoria. But I kept watching, kept gathering evidence, kept waiting for the right moment. The gambling was just the beginning. As Derek's debts grew larger, his methods for dealing with them became more creative. I discovered he had been skimming money from client accounts, using his position at the firm to make unauthorized trades, and had even borrowed money from our parents under false pretenses, telling them he was investing in a sure-thing business opportunity when he was actually covering gambling losses. All of this information went into my file: screenshots, bank records, emails I had recovered from deleted folders, phone logs, betting receipts, everything carefully documented and verified. I even had recordings of phone conversations where Derek discussed his illegal activities with his gambling contacts. Meanwhile, I was building my own life. I graduated with honors, got a job at a respected tech company, and slowly started revealing more of my authentic self to the world. I began dating someone who understood me completely. Someone who supported who I really was rather than who my family expected me to be. I found communities where I belonged, where my differences were celebrated rather than hidden, but I still hadn't told my parents the truth about my personal life. That was the piece Derek thought he could use against me. The irony was that by the time Derek decided to make his move, our parents had already begun to suspect something was different about me. They had met some of my friends, noticed changes in my demeanor, picked up on subtle cues that suggested I was hiding something. More importantly, they had started to realize that whatever I was hiding, it wasn't changing the fact that I was a good person who treated people with kindness and respect. My mother had even asked me directly, one afternoon when we were alone, if there was anything I wanted to tell her about my personal life. When I deflected, she had smiled and said, "Whenever you're ready, honey. We love you no matter what." But Derek didn't know about that conversation. For months, he had been dropping hints about my secret lifestyle, making vague threats about how disappointed our parents would be if they knew the truth. He seemed to enjoy watching me squirm, thinking he was successfully intimidating me into staying quiet and compliant. The truth was, I wasn't squirming because I was afraid of him exposing my secret. I was excited because I knew he was finally ready to spring his trap, which meant it was almost time for me to spring mine. The setup came during our parents' anniversary dinner last month. It was supposed to be a small, intimate celebration, just the 4 of us at their favorite restaurant. Derek had been acting strange all week, with this barely contained energy that suggested he was planning something big. He kept making pointed comments throughout dinner, little jabs about honesty and family values, and how important it was for family members to be authentic with each other. Our parents clearly noticed something was off, but they assumed it was just normal sibling tension. "You know," Derek said during dessert, his voice taking on that familiar tone of fake concern, "I've been thinking a lot about family lately, about how we should all be able to share our true selves with the people who love us most." I felt my heart rate increase, but not from fear. From anticipation. That's a lovely sentiment, our mother said, clearly trying to navigate whatever undercurrent she was sensing between us. I agree, I said calmly, meeting Derek's eyes across the table. I think honesty is incredibly important in families. Sometimes secrets can really poison relationships, don't you think? Derek's smile widened. He thought I was walking into his trap. Exactly, he said, which is why I think it's time for some honesty at this table. Our parents exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable with the direction the conversation was heading. Boys, our father said carefully, if there's something you need to discuss, perhaps we should— No, Dad, Derek interrupted, his voice getting stronger. I think this is exactly the right time and place. I think it's time everyone knew exactly who Orson really is. The restaurant suddenly felt very quiet around our table. I could see our parents' confusion turning to concern as they realized something significant was about to happen. Derek, our mother said quietly. What are you talking about? He leaned back in his chair, clearly savoring what he thought was his moment of triumph. I'm talking about the fact that our perfect little brother has been living a lie for years. I'm talking about the fact that Orson isn't the person you think he is. I set down my fork and looked directly at him. Please, go on. I'd love to hear what you think you know about me. The confidence in my voice seemed to surprise him slightly, but he was too committed to his plan to back down now. Fine, he said, his voice getting louder. Since you won't tell them yourself, I will. Orson is gay. He's been hiding it from you for years, dating men, living this whole secret life while pretending to be something he's not. The silence that followed was deafening. I could see the shock on our parents' faces, but it wasn't the kind of shock Derek had been expecting. Our mother was the first to speak, her voice soft but clear. Is that true, Orson? I looked around the table at my family, at our parents, who had spent 26 years loving and supporting me, and at my brother, who thought he had just delivered a devastating blow. Yes, I said simply, it's true. And then I smiled. Derek's triumphant expression began to falter as he waited for the explosion that never came. Okay, our father said after a moment. Thank you for telling us. That's it? Derek demanded, looking around the table in confusion. That's all you're going to say? Our mother reached across the table and took my hand. Honey, we've known something was different for a while now. We were just waiting for you to feel comfortable enough to share it with us. We love you exactly as you are, our father added. This doesn't change anything. I watched Derek's face go through a series of expressions. Confusion, disbelief, then growing anger as he realized his grand revelation had completely backfired. Are you kidding me? He said, his voice rising enough that other diners were starting to look our way. He's been lying to you for years, and you're just okay with it? He wasn't lying, our mother said firmly. He was protecting himself until he felt safe enough to be vulnerable. There's a difference. That's when I decided it was my turn. You know, Derek, I said, my voice still calm and measured. Since we're having such an honest conversation about family secrets, maybe we should talk about some of your secrets too. The color drained from his face so quickly I thought he might pass out. I don't know what you're talking about, he said, but his voice had lost all its earlier confidence. I pulled out my phone and opened the folder I had been carefully curating for 8 years. Really? Because I have some interesting financial records here that suggest otherwise. Like this statement showing you withdrew $12,000 from Mom and Dad's emergency fund last year. You told them it was for that business investment, remember? Our parents' heads turned toward Derek in unison. Or this series of bank transfers showing you moving money between client accounts at your firm. That's called embezzlement, by the way. Orson, what are you? Derek started, but I wasn't finished. Oh, and this is my personal favorite, I continued, scrolling through my files. Receipt records from 3 different casinos showing you've lost over $60,000 in the past 2 years. $60,000 you don't have, which explains why you've been stealing from clients to cover your debts. The restaurant around us had gone completely silent. Our parents were staring at Derek with expressions of horror and disbelief. Where did you get this information? Derek whispered. I've been watching you for years, I said simply. Every transaction, every lie, every illegal activity. I have bank records, phone recordings, email evidence, betting receipts, everything. I even have recordings of your conversations with Tony Marcelli about your gambling debts. At the mention of Tony's name, Derek went completely white. Tony Marcelli was a loan shark who operated out of the east side of the city, and everyone knew that owing him money was not a situation you wanted to be in. "This is insane," Derek said, his voice getting desperate. "You can't just spy on family members like that. You can't just—" "Can't what?" I interrupted. "Can't protect myself from someone who's been trying to control and manipulate me for years? Can't gather evidence when I suspected you were putting our entire family at financial risk?" I turned to our parents, who were still sitting in stunned silence. "Mom, Dad, I'm sorry you had to find out like this, but Derek has been stealing from his clients, gambling away money he doesn't have, and using family resources to cover his debts. The business investment he told you about last year? That money went straight to a casino in Atlantic City." Our father found his voice first. "Is this true, Derek?" Derek looked around the table like a trapped animal, realizing that his world was crumbling around him. "I can explain everything. It's not as bad as it sounds. I just had some bad luck and I needed—" "It's not bad luck when you steal from clients," our mother said, her voice shaking with anger. "It's not bad luck when you lie to your family. The worst part," I continued, "is that Derek thought he could use my sexuality as a weapon against me. He's been holding it over my head for months, thinking he had some kind of power over me. Meanwhile, he's been committing felonies and putting all of us at risk." The irony of the situation was not lost on anyone at the table. Derek had thought he was exposing my shameful secret, only to have his own truly shameful secrets revealed in return. "I've already contacted the authorities," I said quietly, "and Derek's firm, they'll be conducting their own investigation, but I thought you deserved to know the truth first." Derek stood up so quickly his chair fell backward. "You called the police on your own brother?" "I called the police on someone who was committing crimes," I corrected. "The fact that you're my brother makes it more painful, not less illegal." He stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the exact moment when he realized that the quiet, compliant little brother he thought he could control had outmaneuvered him completely. "This isn't over," he said, grabbing his jacket. "Yes, it is," I replied. "It's been over for a long time. You just didn't know it yet." He stormed out of the restaurant, leaving the three of us sitting in the wreckage of what had supposed to be a celebration. Our mother was crying, but when I started to apologize, she stopped me. "Don't you dare apologize," she said firmly. "You protected this family. You did what needed to be done." Our father nodded slowly. "I'm proud of you, son, for your courage in being honest about who you are, and for your integrity in doing the right thing about your brother." That was 3 weeks ago. Since then, Derek has been arrested and charged with embezzlement and fraud. His firm fired him immediately, and several of his clients are pursuing civil suits. Victoria broke up with him when the news broke, and he's had to move back in with our parents while he awaits trial. The loan shark situation resolved itself when Tony Marcelli decided that someone facing federal charges was too much of a liability to be worth pursuing. Apparently, even criminals have standards about who they'll do business with. Our parents have been incredible through all of this. They've supported me completely in coming out, even helping me plan to introduce them to my boyfriend next month. They've also made it clear that while they'll help Derek with legal fees, their financial support ends there. He needs to face the consequences of his choices. As for me, I've never felt more free. The secret I carried for so long is no longer a burden, and the brother who tried to use it against me is no longer a threat. I got a promotion at work last month, and I'm finally able to live authentically without fear. The beautiful irony is that Derek's attempt to destroy me ended up destroying him instead. He walked into the trap thinking he was the hunter, never realizing he had been the prey all along. I learned something important through all of this. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about hurting someone else. It's about protecting yourself so thoroughly that their attempts to hurt you end up revealing their own weaknesses. Derek didn't lose everything because I wanted to punish him. He lost everything because his own actions made that outcome inevitable. I simply made sure I was ready with a spotlight when he finally stepped into the darkness he had been hiding in for years. Last week I ran into one of Derek's former colleagues at a coffee shop downtown. He recognized me and came over to talk. "You know," he said, "a lot of us suspected something was wrong with Derek's accounts, but we could never prove anything. When your evidence came to light, it was like all the pieces finally fell into place." "I'm sorry this happened to your company," I said. He shook his head. "Don't be sorry. You probably saved us from much worse losses down the road. Men like your brother don't stop until they're forced to stop. That conversation crystallized something I had been thinking about for weeks. Derek hadn't just been hurting me with his manipulation and control. He had been hurting everyone around him. Our parents, his clients, his colleagues, even Victoria. By protecting myself, I had ended up protecting all of them too. Sometimes people ask me if I feel guilty about what happened to my brother. The honest answer is no. I feel sad that he made the choices he made, and I feel sorry that our family had to go through this pain. But I don't feel guilty for refusing to be his victim. And I don't feel guilty for making sure his victims got justice. Derek spent years trying to keep me small, trying to make sure I never realized my own power. He thought my differences made me weak, that my secrets made me vulnerable. He never understood that spending years learning to protect myself had actually made me stronger than he could imagine. The last time I saw him was at our parents' house 2 weeks ago. I had stopped by to drop off some documents related to the case, and he was there packing up some of his belongings. He looked tired and defeated, a far cry from the confident, controlling person he had been just a month earlier. "I hope you're happy," he said when he saw me. "I'm not happy that this happened," I replied honestly. "I'm happy that it's over." He stared at me for a moment, and I thought he might actually apologize, might acknowledge the years of manipulation and control. Instead, he just shook his head. "You always were too smart for your own good," he said. I realized in that moment that he still didn't understand. He still thought this was about me being clever or calculating. He didn't understand that this was about me refusing to be controlled, refusing to live in fear, refusing to let his threats and manipulation define my life. "No, Derek," I said quietly. I was exactly as smart as I needed to be. As I walked away from that house, I felt a sense of closure I hadn't expected. The chapter of my life defined by fear and secrecy was finally over. The brother who had tried to control me was no longer a threat. The parents who loved me knew exactly who I was and supported me completely. I had spent 8 years planning for one moment, but that moment had given me the rest of my life back. People sometimes ask me if I would do anything differently, knowing what I know now. The answer is yes. I would have told my parents the truth about myself much sooner. I would have trusted them to love me unconditionally, instead of letting fear and Derek's manipulation keep me hiding. But I don't regret the vigilance, the careful documentation, the years of watching and waiting. Those skills protected me when I needed protection, and they gave me the power to protect others when the time came. The most important thing I learned is that secrets only have power over you if you let them. Once I stopped being afraid of my truth being revealed, Derek lost all his power over me. Once I started gathering truths about him, I gained the power to protect myself and others from his harmful behavior. Today, I'm living the life I always dreamed of but never thought I could have. I'm successful in my career, honest about who I am, surrounded by people who love and support me exactly as I am. I'm planning to move in with my boyfriend next month, and we're talking about getting engaged. My parents and I are closer than we've ever been. They've told me how proud they are of my courage, both in living authentically and in doing the right thing about Derek. My mother has started volunteering with a local LGBTQ support organization, and my father has become an unexpected advocate for acceptance in his conservative social circles. As for Derek, he's facing up to 10 years in federal prison. His trial is scheduled for next spring, and the evidence against him is overwhelming. I hope he uses this time to reflect on the choices that led him here, and I hope he finds a way to become a better person. But his journey is no longer my responsibility. For the first time in my adult life, I'm free to focus on my own path, my own dreams, my own happiness. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well, while the person who tried to hurt you faces the natural consequences of their own actions. Derek thought he was playing chess while I was playing checkers. He never realized I was playing an entirely different game, one where the goal wasn't to defeat him, but to build a life so strong and authentic that his attacks couldn't touch it. In the end, I didn't have to destroy my brother. I just had to stop letting him destroy me. Everything else was simply a matter of patience, preparation, and finally being ready to turn on the lights when he had been hiding in the dark for too long.